Kia ora, talofa lava, no mai haere mai. Welcome to our early literacy clinic. And my topic today is 10 ways to help children remember. And this is quite an important topic for me, actually, personally, because not only am I a teacher of children who find it hard to remember, one of my children has working memory and short-term memory problems. He's had them all his life. So I have spent a lot of time thinking about and coming up with strategies to help not just my students, but to help in my own home, to help my son remember. So it's something that really interests me. And also I found it's actually really helpful for my own memory. So I'm going to hit you with 10 ways that I have found super useful. And one thing I would like to say is that I'm not going to present like an academic explanation of how memory works. You know, you can get that elsewhere. I'm just going to give you some practical tips of how to help your students remember what it is they're learning. But I'm also not the world's expert on this. So if you have any tips or ideas, put them in the chat, send them through, because it would be wonderful for everyone to get ideas from a greater resource than just myself. Now, my number one tip for helping children remember is to get them to say things out loud. Saying things out loud is the number one way to help memory. A good way to do that is with I say, you says. For example, I'll say cat. The trick with cat is you spell it with a C, and then I say to the students, right, say it after me, and they all say, the trick with cat is you spell it with a C. So saying it out loud is the number one way to help memory. And that's because it makes it more conscious and the brain is actually listening to it. And this is actually a good tip for us as adults. You know, when I get home from school and I've got my keys, you know, you put them down, you can't find them later. So as I put my keys down, I say out loud, I'm putting my keys on the bench. And that will help me remember later, because by saying it out loud, I've triggered my memory. So that's tip number one. Second tip, repetition, repetition, repetition. The Teletubbies got it right again. And you know, I wish I'd known this when I started teaching, that when I teach something, I do need to get them to repeat it after me or say it with me. And I need to make my teaching point more than once in the lesson to have a better chance at children remembering it. And the tip here is to repeat at the time of learning. So you would say something like, if you're holding up the letter card and you're saying, so this letter is makes the sound k. What's the sound? Everyone says k. Tell me again. K. Tell me again. K. So you get them to repeat it and do it after you a couple of times and maybe half a minute later. So Early Words is a good example of a program that has a lot of repetition at the time of learning. So that's different from revision, which is going over it later after the learning. This is in the moment of learning, getting them to repeat it again and again. So when you're teaching something like that trick with cat, is you spell it with a C, I'll say, Amy, what's the trick? And she'll say, spell it with the C. Got it. Hema, what's the trick? Spell it with the C. So as you're teaching, you're asking them to repeat it back to you, and you're repeating it as well. So it's repeating in the moment of learning, and that we want to say it out loud. That way you're getting two memory strategies for the price of one. So they're repeating and they're saying it out loud. And this signifies to the brain that it's worth attending to, because you are giving it this attention by making them say it on repeat. The third tip to help children remember is the importance of revision. So think about the children you work with. We all know, don't we, the children who are likely to forget it later. So make a little list that might be on paper or just a list in your brain of those, like, let's say 4 children. And those are the ones that you go back to later. So this is different from repetition, because this is after the learning where you get them to revise. So you want, with those children, you want to come in before they forget and have the opportunity to revise. So the research shows there, for children who find it hard to remember, increase the number of opportunities to revise. So think about memory as being a piece of string. And when you learn something new, it goes into your short-term memory. And what we want it to do is to make it its way down to long-term memory. But we know for a lot of children, it comes into short-term memory and then it falls out. And then you've got to teach it again and it comes into their short-term memory and then it drops out and you've got to teach it again. So the idea with revision is you prop it up in the short-term memory. So maybe an hour later or 2 hours later, you just bring it out again. Say it's a letter card, bring it out again. So what was that sound? What was the sound for this letter? And just bring it into their consciousness, to keep it in their short-term memory so it can make its way down to long-term permanent memory. And really, you want to do that at no longer than 2 to 5 hours after learning something. And the aim is to have 5 revisions. Now, I know this is the ideal world and we're super busy and we've got lots of other things to do, but it's just to be mindful if for those 4 or 5 children that you think are not going to remember it for tomorrow, if you can just like flash them with the letter card or ask them, so what was the trick with spelling cat? If you can do that 2, 3, whatever you can manage over the course of the day, that will really help them as well. And it's the Memory Foundation who say, like aim for 5 revisions to try and get that embedded. Tip number 4 is about rote learning. Now, is it right or wrong? So this is quite controversial because when I trained as a teacher back in the 80s, we were told no rote learning and that children need to learn by understanding. And I agree, of course, they need to learn by understanding, and making it meaningful is really crucial. But for some things, the fact that the learning is meaningful isn't enough for them to remember it long term. So that's why I think actually there is a bit of a case for rote learning, for things that have to be known without processing, like your vowel phonemes, like your times tables, like your basic facts, your phone number, the lines for a play. So these are things that you have to memorize. So this is not replacing the learning in the meaningful time. I don't want children, let's say we're doing the vowels. I'm not going to go straight into vowel drilling. I'm going to teach the vowels first using my stage 2 lessons. But afterwards, I'll do some vowel drilling to really cement it. So rote learning is as well as, not instead of, the teaching. So we do the teaching and then we follow it up with the rote learning for the things they just have to know. So I have found, let's say vowel drilling, I've got a video on my YouTube channel about how to do vowel drilling, far more effective than just teaching repeatedly the stage 2 vowel lessons. So I'm going to teach them once, twice, maybe 3 times, and then come in with the drilling after the teaching. And the research shows that children who rote learn something that they actually understand are more successfully able to apply it to problems later. I mean, think of the times tables, and if you memorize them like I had to when I was at school, I can use those quite effectively because I know how they work and I know them off by heart. The next tip to help memory, to help our tamariki, is the importance of small bites. Not too much learning at once, right? So just small bites. And this is why I often say teaching is an art form. I mean, it's a science, but it's also an art form because this is something you monitor by looking at the children as they're learning, as they're teaching. How much of a bite can they actually take? So for example, 1 spelling word at a time. Now, for my son, coming home with 10 spelling words, my heart would just go, oh, because there's just no way he could learn 10 spelling words all at once by Friday. So we would take 1 word and we would learn that really, really well, maybe for 2 days. And then we would learn the next word and then the next word. And maybe by Friday, there were 3 words he could definitely spell. So he would only get 3 out of 10. But he would have got 0 out of 10 if we had tried to do all 10 at once. So just do 1 at a time. Vowel drilling is another one. Teach 1 phoneme. I would start with A. Teach it really, really well before you bring in the next one, and then teach those 2. Make sure they can go from one to the other really, really well. Then bring in the 3rd one, and that might take a period of time, but it's the small bites. Same with learning lines for a play. Next tip to help memory: be an active learner, not a passive learner. The brain is not designed to sit passively and learn. The brain is designed to be active. We're not designed to learn just by sitting meekly. So we want to actively engage the brain. So in our lessons, and you can see this in our phonics lessons, we've got the eyes, the mouth, the hands. We've got lots of things happening in the lesson. The I say, you says. Yes, the eyes have to be on the teacher, but we want to be actively teaching with them and them actively joining in. Ideally for me, this is why I have those small letter cards. I want them touching the letter cards, engaged touch as well, so that they're tracing the letter on their palm as they're learning it, or they're tracing it on the carpet. So we want to have them actively involved. So that physical interaction, that they are physically moving. Think of shared writing, the traditional way of teaching shared writing, where the teacher's up the front, the children are on the whāriki, on the mat, and the teacher's writing doing the shed writing, that 1 or 2 children might come up and help her. Well, really, what are the rest of the children doing? So have whiteboards out at shed writing. So when the teachers start, oh, room 5, I don't know how to spell rocket, everybody can pick up the whiteboard and have a go. That way they're actively engaged, and maybe the stage 2 children on your mat will just give you the R, that's fine, and this child might give you the K, and this child might give the T. Say, show me, everyone, show me what you've got. Oh, thanks, Nathan, for the R, and thanks, Emma, for the K, and thanks, Naomi, for the T, and I'll just pop in what you didn't have. That's shared writing, because everyone's helping the teacher, everyone's engaged, they're not just sitting passively and watching. And it's that active engagement and learning with everyone joining in and touches involved that will help cement things in their memory. Next thing is reduce stimulation. Look, I've got a nice calm little green rectangle there to look at. If there's too much happening, then memory isn't going to work as effectively as what we would like it to do, because there's too many distractions for memory. So reduce stimulation, less busyness. So be mindful of your mat area. So is your mat area facing like a window with things happening behind it, with people walking by? What's it facing? You know, I like to have very little, and where I teach currently, I'm in a small learning environment because I'm just working with groups. I just have on the wall where the children are facing the absolute minimum, you know, so it's my alphabet chart, my high frequency word chart, but not too many things. I do like to have quite a visually stimulating classroom, but they can be on the other walls. But when the children are learning and they might be facing me, I like to have visually not too much happening. Quiet learning spaces, you know, if there's lots of noise going on, if room 8 are playing volleyball outside your classroom window, you know, that's distracting. So that quietness is important. And the last thing I just want to make a point about is about being still when you're learning. Now, this is tricky because there is evidence to suggest that for some children, moving while they're learning is very helpful. And I can see that with actually my own children. But that's where you can bring in a fidget ball, or I would say to them, like, you can just like move your fingers, but if we can try and keep the body still, because all of that movement can distract learning. You're going to have to gauge that with your individual student though, because some students actually do need to move more than others. Sometimes I'll just have like I'll just gently place my hand on their arm as they're reading, and just get a little bit of stillness. And I have found that can be quite effective, but again, you do have to gauge it. Don't keep them on the carpet for too long. Okay, so we want them to be still for certain periods of learning, but you can't expect them to be still for like half an hour. I mean, they're young animals, they need to move, and we need to have lots of physical activity between the times that we want them to be still, because being still and not being too distracted will help memory as well. My 8th tip is to have a good routine. Routines help memory, both classroom and in my case, home routines as well. And because not as much brain power is needed when you know what's going on. Because just think about if you are doing something new for the first time, you've got to take so much of your cognitive ability and apply it to, what am I doing? Now what am I doing? Now what I'm doing? So less cognitive ability is free for the actual learning and for remembering. But if you know what's happening, because the lesson structure is the same and the routine is the same, then you've got more cognitive ability free to attend to learning and memory, building memory. It frees up the brain power for learning and remembering. Right, next one. We've got 2 left. Got to go fast. Having memory support props. So things like, you know, cards, alphabet cards, high frequency word cards. I use the BD cards a lot. You can get them from Twinkle. I'll point a smiley face on the pointing finger. I'll write B and D on their hands. So some of my students, when they come in, they're just walking straight away. I'll say, what do you want today, BD? And they go, or PQ is another one. And I write if they want me to. I don't do it if they don't want me to. And I should just point out, my daughter, who has dyscalculia, which is learning issues to do with mathematics, her whole life she struggled with left and right. And at 18, she took herself off to the tattoo parlor and got L and R tattooed on her hands. And you know what? 5 years later, she said she's never regretted it, and it's massively helped her driving. I'm not suggesting you tattoo your students. Last one. The research shows if children don't get it the first time, don't find a new way to teach it. It's better to repeat it rather than find a new way. But obviously, you just need to make it fresh and fun each time. So if you're repeating something and we're learning how to spell like, L-I-K-E, like, you can shout it, sing it, whisper it. It's basically doing the same thing again and again. You're just making it fresh each time so it's not boring, but it's better to do that than try and come up with a whole new way of teaching it. And remember, teachers, learning is going on, even if you can't see it at this point. I've had students where I've thought, is anything going in? Yes, stuff was going in. It just took longer. Don't be discouraged. Kia kaha. All right, those are my 10 top ways to help children remember what they're learning. And if you have any ways, please type them in the chat to share with us, and we'll look at those in a moment. But I will just finish there by saying I hope that was helpful. I'm going to stop recording and we'll move on to our Q&A.